Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a silent switch, the Akko Fairy Silent. Let's get started. But firstly, as a disclaimer, these switches were sent to me by Akko. I wasn't paid to make this review and I will remain as impartial as I can as per usual. Anyway, enjoy the review. Now, before I continue, I would suggest that you go ahead and watch the Hazepink review before this one, just for some additional context since I'll be referring to that video quite a lot. Now, these are Akko's second attempt at making a quiet switch, the first one being the Hazepink Silent, which released earlier this year, and in my opinion, those were decent switches. Now, pricing wise, these are $13.99 for 45 switches on Akko, placing these in the budget range. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now, let's move on to the switch categories. On-center key presses are slightly scratchy with very minor inconsistencies at very slow key presses. Off-center key presses are also slightly scratchy with a bit more inconsistencies, but again only at very slow key presses. Overall, these are noticeably scratchier compared to the Hazepink Silent, but compared to the rest of the market, these are still pretty smooth. 7 out of 10. Now, according to Akko, these switches actuate at 50 grams at 2mm with a total travel of 3.3mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, these feel lighter than what the force curve suggests, which also was the case with the Hazepink Silent. In fact, they feel very similar weighting-wise. However, consistency-wise, well, it's an Akko switch, so they're very consistent. Although it's not as consistent as the Hazepink Silent, probably due to the smoothness, but that's a very minor issue here. Overall, despite that, these are still in the upper echelon in terms of consistency. I just wish they had a heavier version for me to test out. Maybe next time. 4 out of 10. Now, sound, weirdly enough, is where the two switches differ quite a lot, which is weird given that they're both silent switches, but they do have a distinct sound difference. Take a listen. So as you can tell, these switches are much more muted. It's almost as if the Hazepink Silent is not silenced, but that just goes to show how quiet these switches are. Overall, their quietness is their main selling point, so if you're looking for a lightweight, ultra-silent switch, this should be on your wish list. 7 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, the first thing I have to address is of course the light weighting, which I wasn't 100% comfortable with throughout my testing period since I made so many typos with them. Now, another downside to them is their mushy typing feel. Of course, this is so that the switches can achieve its ultra quiet signature, but that's at the cost of typing feel, which in this case doesn't feel great. It reminds me of a rubber dome, and I think most enthusiasts don't want that. However, they've remained extremely consistent throughout with no issues, but I did notice hints of inconsistencies at slower typing speeds. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it's something to note. Additionally, the reduced total travel is instantly noticeable, but this is something you'll either like or dislike. In my case, I didn't mind it, but if you're not used to it, it might throw you off for a couple of days, so keep that in mind. Overall, these are essentially quieter and mushier Hazepink Silents with less travel. I'm not a fan of it, but I don't generally enjoy light, quiet linear switches to begin with anyway. 4 out of 10. Now, gaming, just like when it comes to typing, their lightweighting was a downside for me in faster paced games, but they weren't too bad when things started to slow down. Additionally, and this could be a downside to some, but I enjoyed how quiet these were since I tend to have an issue when I can hear switch noises in the background, especially when playing stealth games. Now, consistency-wise, I had no issues with them, although there were times I could feel hints of scratchiness on off-center key presses. It's barely noticeable and only happened on very slow key presses, so it wasn't a big deal, but again worth noting. Finally, the mushiness and the shorter total travel had no effect on my performance in the slightest, but your mileage may vary. Overall, it gains 1 extra point compared to the Haze Paint Silent due to its quieter nature, and if you're looking for the quietest switch for gaming at a reasonable price, this is a nice option. 5 out of 10. In conclusion, the biggest selling point here is obviously the extremely quiet nature of these switches and the affordable price point. I expect these things to sell out very quickly. The final score for this switch is 27 out of 50 or 54%, which is not bad considering I'm not the target audience here. And that's the end of the review, and next time I'll be looking at another silenced switch. Anyway, until then, take care and goodbye.